Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jennifer Pattison Tuohy joins me, Mikah Sargent, and we start the show by talking about the FTC's new click-to-cancel rule, how we're finally getting a ruling that says you got to make it as easy to cancel a subscription as it is to sign up for one. Then I talk about Apple Pay. It's just entered its 10th year, and Jennifer Pattison Tuohy and I talk about how Tap to Pay has changed over time and look forward to a future where more comes to our digital wallet. Then Jason Howell of TechSploder stops by to tell us about what's new in Android with Android 15 and what's coming to Pixel devices in particular, before David Carnoy of CNET joins us, who had the opportunity to go hands-on with all of Amazon's new Kindles and shows off the Paperwhite on screen. All of that coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 358, with Jennifer Pattison Tuohy and me, Mikah Sargent, recorded Thursday, October 17th, 2024. FTC's new click-to-cancel rule. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking that tech news. I am one of your hosts. My name is Mikah Sargent, and if this is your first time joining us, or you've been here before, you're still going to hear my spiel, which is that each week, but the fifth week, to be clear, I bring on an awesome guest to join me for the first half of the show, and it is Jennifer Pattison Tuohy's turn. Welcome back, Jennifer.
Hi, Mikah. Great to be here, as always. My second appearance on TWiT this week, so I'm excited.
Yeah, you really put in your hours this week.
I have.
Hours and hours and hours. So I'm very appreciative that you were able to still join me here on Tech News Weekly. For people who are, again, first time here, we kick things off by talking about our kind of stories of the week. These are stories that stuck out to us, or in some cases, it's a story that broke this morning or came out this morning that I just thought was very interesting and thought was worth sharing. In any case, though, we don't start with my story. We start with Jennifer's.
And my story is the most exciting thing that has happened in a very long time. I'm just going to start there. Just build up the tension. So this happened on Wednesday, which was yesterday. Sorry, my week is... and basically, the FTC is going to make it really easy to cancel your subscriptions. It's like, whoa, this is so exciting. It's called Click to Cancel. And this was actually proposed last year, but has been approved and will go into effect in 6 months' time. And the idea behind this is that, as I'm sure everyone listening has experienced, it's got so much easier to sign up for things and join programs, memberships, online by just clicking join, or on your smartphone or on your smart TV if you want to watch a show and it's like, oh, do you want to sign up for HBO to watch this show? Or Max, sorry. Click here and you're subscribed. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe I don't want this anymore. Maybe I want to cancel this, or maybe I don't want to be a member of this gym anymore and I want to cancel it. This is the sort of law of cancellation, is how hard it is to cancel a gym membership. And the FTC is basically making it required that companies, no matter what company they are, this includes cable TV, gyms, online subscription services, Max, Netflix, all of these services that you pay for monthly or yearly or however often, you have to be able to cancel just as easily as you signed up. And I just went through this whole process about 3 months ago when I was like trimming the bills, I was like, I've got too many services. I'm going to cancel a few. And it was ridiculous, the number of services. I couldn't actually find a way to cancel online. There was nothing. Or if it was there, it was buried in many menus and you have to click through 7 or 8 marketing opportunities that's trying to convince you to stay. The New York Times is a good example of this. It will keep trying to say, oh, well, how about you'd like it for half price? Will you stay now? And then there's a little button right down the bottom that says continue in tiny, tiny letters if you want to subscribe. To continue to cancel. So this is going to fix that problem for everyone. And this is a problem that everyone has experienced. So yay, Linda Khan, yay, FTC. I'm excited about this. Are you excited about this, Mikah?
Very, very excited about this. So I have been watching this make its way through the system, actually, and knew that it existed as a concept and was waiting for it to be, put into play, because this is easily one of the, it is absolutely the bane of my existence. I am notoriously very bad at canceling subscriptions. I'm going to give a few examples here because this is the opportunity for me to bear my shame. When I first moved to California back in 2019, I wanted to have I have drinking water, and I wanted to have drinking water and have it very easily at my home and not have to use a bunch of plastic bottles that you buy at the store. So I got a water subscription, and so, regularly they'd deliver 5-gallon bottles of water to the thing, and it had a dispenser and everything. And then I finally took the time, and there are people in California who are going to be mad at me about this, but I finally took the time. For many, many years, I have had and always would install at each place I lived in my reverse osmosis water system. But basically, when I got hired at TWiT, it was kind of like hey, we'd like you to come work for us, and then me moving very soon after. And so I knew that within the first few months, I was going to just be getting settled in a new place. So I didn't have time to get that water set up. Finally, I got it set up, had the drinking water from my RO system, but I didn't want to call and cancel the stupid water subscription service because I knew they were going to try to get me to stay in all these different ways. And so I just
spend 20 minutes on the phone, go through a phone tree to get to them, or a chat bot, or
and it's during a certain period of time.
Yes.
And if you call at the wrong time, then they're not there. And so I kept getting 5-gallon bottles of water delivered to my door for way longer than I should have, I'm embarrassed to admit, and just I basically looked like a doomsday prepper. Right. Finally, I canceled it. That's one example. The other example is that when I was moving to Oregon, where I am now, I knew I needed to cancel my internet service. And I knew the first thing they were going to do was try to figure out if the new place that I lived was going to have their internet service. It did, but I was getting something else because I wanted fiber. So I said, I know what I'm going to do. I am going to tell the person that I am moving to, I think I said Sweden. I am moving.
I've done that. I'm moving back to England. Sorry.
So you have service in England? You get a real pass, right? Yeah, exactly. So I said, I'm moving to Sweden.
Leaving the country.
I double checked that the service wasn't somehow offered there. And then it was kind of a bummer because the very kind, very sweet person on the other end of the phone was then asking me about oh, that's a big move. How come? It's related to
Tell me your life story.
Yeah, exactly. But they didn't try to upsell me. They didn't, or downsell me, I guess, because really, it'd be a discount or whatever. And that made me happy, but I was also really sad about it. So basically what I'm saying is I go through a lot of hurdles, or I otherwise don't go through any hurdles and just ignore it until it becomes a problem. So I am very excited about this. This is going to save me so much headache.
Yes, so exciting. And there's a few there's a few areas that it's, I think we may not see this necessarily go into effect day one. I think companies will, be working through the new laws. And also the fine, I believe, is relatively small. So I think, how quickly we're actually going to see this benefit remains to be seen. But I think it's really interesting in understanding the way the internet has completely transformed the way we interact with companies. And, being able to have this instant connection to a company by just pressing a button and suddenly you're subscribed and that's been a benefit. It's been so much easier to do things than it ever has in the past. But that flip side where things are so complicated that we've all ended up, I mean, there are entire industries now, entire businesses based on helping us manage our subscriptions and helping us cut back on our subscriptions, because subscription overload has just gone crazy. It's not just the cable company or your electric bills. It's everything. There is a subscription there could be a subscription for almost anything in your life today. And it's useful because, paying for things in bulk up front is expensive. It's great to be able to have these opportunities and have the flexibility. But one thing I'd noticed in the last, I guess it's been about 2 years, maybe a bit less, and this leads into our next story to some extent, is that Apple has made it so much easier. Apple has click to cancel for subscriptions right now. If you subscribe to something through your iPhone, it's so much easier to cancel than any other way. But, there are downsides to that too. But I was like, why can't everything be this easy to just click off? I don't want this anymore. For instance, I signed up during the pandemic to a number of online subscription services. ButcherBox is one of them. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's where they ship fresh meat, frozen fresh meat to your door, because we were all avoiding supermarkets. I also signed up for Naked Wines, which is a wine subscription service, and I loved them. They were great. But then it gets to the point where I don't need this every month. Both of those companies, there was nothing on their website that explained how to cancel. There was no phone number, because a lot of companies don't let you call them anymore. Like, it's just not possible to do. There's no phone number for most of these new online companies. So I had to email them both and, wait 6 to 7 days before they got back to me, because email seems to always be a very slow form of communicating with companies. To their credit, to both companies' credits, they did my first email. Okay, we've cancelled and we've refunded you the difference, which was great. But still, it's like I shouldn't have to go through that process of waiting and just being able, to cancel with a click if you signed up with a click. And then the other option being, if you signed up in person, the new rules are going to say you have to be able to cancel over the phone. I think they actually bring this up in several of the articles about the new policy, is that you shouldn't have to mail a letter to cancel your gym membership, which appears to be one of the ways I think Planet Fitness is named in here, makes you have to send a letter in order to cancel.
That is ridiculous.
I haven't bought a stamp in years. I wouldn't know how to do that. Well, I know how to do it, but it's a pain.
Right.
Don't make things hard. Because the beauty of making it easy to cancel is it's easy for people to resubscribe to, and that's very much the culture. I think a lot of services people will sign up for maybe 2 or 3 months, and if you make it easy to cancel, then you're more likely to come back. I agree. It's also addressing the issue of stealth subscriptions. So, for example, if you sign up for a free trial, they have to be very, very clear about when you'll start to get charged. There has to be notifications when you start to get charged. These sort of stealth subscriptions that I'm sure many people have sort of fallen into the trap of. For example, I had a Comcast experience where I just tried out their live over-the-air live streaming live channels. So I wanted local channels, but I didn't have an antenna and I didn't want a cable box, but they brought out the option for doing live streaming local channels. And they sent me a box and they said, you can cancel in 30 days if you don't like it. And I canceled in 30 days and I said, do I need to do anything? They said, no. And then 2 years later, I happened to look at my bill and they had been charging me $10 a month for this box. I was so mad. They did refund me.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
But after 3.5 hours on hold and lots of yelling. So that is the end of this for us. Hopefully, no more having to stay on hold. Maybe I know there's actually, is it Google that has the capability to
be on hold for you?
To be on hold for you, yes. So, maybe we won't need that anymore, although there are still many companies that you have to try and get on the phone to get anything resolved. But yay, FTC. I'm excited.
This is a big one. It's for the consumer.
Yes.
And that's what I love. And I feel like if there's one, well, actually I would say two. I'd say FCC and FTC both, you really just see them make decisions sometimes that just directly impact the consumer, and I love that. I think it's pretty great. And I realize, part of that is because that's their direct focus. But it's just, it's cool to see these very large organizations working toward something that is impactful to the average user. All right, we have to take a quick break before we come back with my story of the week. I want to start by telling you about Flashpoint, who are sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. For security leaders, 2024 has been a year like no other. Cyber threats and physical security concerns have continued to increase, and now geopolitical instability is adding a new layer of risk and uncertainty. So let's talk about the numbers here. Last year, there was a staggering 84% rise in ransomware attacks and a 34% jump in data breaches. You may have heard about a number of them. The result, trillions of dollars in financial losses and threats to safety worldwide. That is where Flashpoint comes in. See, Flashpoint empowers organizations to make mission-critical decisions that will keep their people and their assets safe. So you may be wondering how? Well, by combining cutting-edge technology with the expertise of world-class analyst teams, and with Ignite, which is Flashpoint's award-winning threat intelligence platform. So you get access to critical data, finished intelligence, alerts, and analytics all in one place. You can maximize your existing security investments. Some Flashpoint customers avoid $500 million in fraud loss annually and have a 482% return on investment in 6 months. Flashpoint earned Frost & Sullivan's 2024 Global Product Leadership Award for unrivaled threat data and intelligence. An SVP of cyber operations at a large U.S. financial institution had this to say: Flashpoint saves us over $80 million in fraud losses every year. Their proactive approach and sharp insights are crucial in keeping our financial institution secure. They're not just a solution, they're a strategic partner helping us stay ahead of cyber threats. So it's no wonder Flashpoint is trusted by both mission-critical businesses and governments worldwide. To access the industry's best threat data and intelligence, visit flashpoint.io today. That's flashpoint.io. And we thank Flashpoint for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and that means it is time for my story of the week. I wanted to mention, and this will start out being kind of focused on Apple, but it is kind of a larger conversation about the tap-to-pay experience in general. Apple put out a post this morning called Apple Celebrates 10 Years of Apple Pay. And in it, they talk about what has changed over the years as Apple Pay has been introduced. And throughout this piece, they talk about kind of some of the ideas that they have going forward. And I think that's where this conversation is interesting, or is particularly interesting. But I want to start by talking about Apple Pay in general, because I remember with the launch of Apple Pay, having so much skepticism as a U.S. individual. In other countries, tap to pay was a little bit more prominent. But here in the U.S., and particularly where I was in the Midwest at the time, I thought, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And it was this thing that I wanted to try, but I was always nervous to try because I thought, oh boy, I'm going to be that person who's taking up too much time in line, and then finally getting used to it over time, and now pretty much using it everywhere I go. It's not just in the US either. In many, many places around the world, Apple Pay is regularly used. It is one of my favorite things when I lived, especially in California, was the transit option, so that I could just tap my Apple Watch or my phone against the transit option, and it would automatically choose my Clipper card and, move me right along. The other thing about Apple Pay that kind of stands out and I think makes it such a great product or service is the fact that when you are doing a transaction at a place, your actual card details are never shared with that company. And so it cuts down on fraud, it cuts down on breaches, the impact of breaches rather. And I think that's what makes it even better, so that it's one of these rare things where the feature lines up with so much more. It's the convenience that makes it the reason why a lot of people are using it. But because it's convenient and because a lot of people are using it, along the way, they're also getting the benefit of this security, this privacy that's involved as well. Now, with all that in mind, I want to talk about some of the things that Apple is working on. With iOS 18, there are going to be some installment loan options that are built in. And I want to kind of talk about that separately because this is an interesting topic with lots of thoughts. And also the ability to redeem rewards for certain credit cards and banks. So Discover credit cards, for example, is going to integrate to give users the ability to redeem a cash back reward, which is pretty cool. Apparently, pretty soon, people who have a PayPal debit card will be able to view their balance actually in the Apple Wallet app. And so it's just becoming clear that over time, Apple is really expanding on this technology to add so many different features to really try to replace your wallet, which is neat. And then, of course, Apple Pay is one aspect of Apple Wallet. The other aspect of Apple Wallet is the introduction of the licensing system that's available for some states. So being able to add your license and use it at an airport is pretty much the only place it seems like, and only at some airports. But hopefully that will expand as well. So I wanted to ask you first and foremost about your experience with Tap to Pay and Apple Pay. And then we can kind of talk about a couple of these things before we have to say goodbye.
Yeah, well, and also one thing they don't mention in the press release that is going to be very interesting is that Apple Pay, or the tap to pay with your phone, is going to be opened up to third-party developers with iOS 18.1 because of the antitrust cases and some new rules in the EU. Apple has to open this up because it's considered a lock-in, and it's one of the key parts of the US government's antitrust case against Apple is that this is a lock-in, and it is a lock-in, but it works really well, which is, how lock-ins work. But it will be interesting that, we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but the NFC chip in the Apple phones will have to be accessible to third-party developers. So in theory, you might have a different type of tap to pay or tap to anything on your phones in the future. But in terms of how I've used it, so you mentioned Europe earlier, and it is interesting because I live in a more rural area. I live in South Carolina, and using Apple Pay up until maybe a year ago was pretty rare. There weren't many places that accepted it. And then when I was in England, I think a visit sort of 2 or 3 years ago, that was the only way people paid for things everywhere. There was not a single place I went, not even like a tiny little, gift shop, not a chain store or anything, all restaurants accept it everywhere in England accepts Apple Pay. And the alternatives, if you have an Android phone, so Google Pay, Samsung Pay, it's the form of paying in Europe and also, in England specifically. And also that's because they've had tap to pay with your card for so long that the infrastructure was there. It was very easy switch. So I've really, my trip to England a couple of years ago really sort of opened it up to me. It's like, wow, this is just so much better. And not having to carry my wallet around, except for having to carry my driver's license in the States. You don't have to carry a driver's license with you in Europe. So you can just...
What?
You do not have to carry a driver's license, no. So you could just leave the house with your phone, and that is all you needed. And one thing we also didn't mention about the NFC chip is it's a key for your home, and your phone can be a key for your car if you have the right car with the UWB chip. So yeah, I want to get to the stage where I can just walk out of my house and the only thing I have to have with me is my phone or even my
just
watch.
A watch. Yeah.
And I actually got the cellular version, my first Apple Watch for cellular, and I just got the new Apple Watch. I had an SE, so I was long due for an upgrade. And I got cellular for precisely that reason. I want to be able to have that function. I mean, the freedom of not having to carry anything is just, it's the future. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Very excited. And it's great for having kids too, because I can just text my daughter $5 to Apple Cash, and she can tap to pay with Apple Cash without having to have a bank account or having to give her a debit card or give her cash. And that convenience is, it's unmatched.
Isn't the pound worth more than the dollar right now? I think I would ask for £5.
It's always worth. The pound's always worth more than the dollar.
So, yeah, I'm like, I will take that £5, thank you. This is. I'm really excited about this too. Of course, you've as is fair in the chat, they're talking about how you should carry cash on you. Computers go down, et cetera, et cetera. Sure, yes, definitely do somewhere. I don't know, in your shoe.
Most
whatever.
people carry cards. Before this, it was cards. It's still cash is definitely. I mean, a lot of places since the pandemic won't even take cash.
Exactly.
Where I am, for sure, that's the case. And
that freaks out Americans. Americans get real weird about that. They're like, boy, some folks do not like that idea. Many of my family members back in Missouri would be and are very much against this idea that cash can't, be used at a place. Never mind. I won't go into that. So yeah, I understand. Yeah, if the infrastructure goes down, then I'll give you my gold tooth. So I don't have a gold tooth. Don't try to take my tooth. I think that part of it is really cool. I've been enjoying some of the features that have been added to Apple Pay, like being able to track orders when that does work. It doesn't seem to work every time, but when sites have that enabled, that's been really nice.
Well, being able to use it online is a newish thing, which I've really liked, because I hate having to type in my details to a random website. I don't really like the filling in thing. Never always works because I have to go and get my code that I don't remember. And then the other option, like the Shopify, sometimes those things work, sometimes they don't. But just saw in chat, Home Depot just added Apple Pay. Someone was saying they were waiting for Home Depot to add it, and they finally did, like last week. So it's, the momentum is definitely there. And so, being able to use Apple Pay online, I really like. But one of the things that I noticed recently that's new, and you mentioned, is this Klarna. I actually went to use Apple Pay last night to buy a ticket for Fright Nights, which is at a local farm for my daughter, and the Boone Hall Fright Nights. And I was using Apple Pay because, again, it's one of those websites where hasn't got a good UI, and you have to type in a tiny little text box your entire credit card number and just giving it off to some farm. So I used Apple Pay. I was pleased to see it was there. And then it gave me the option to pay for this ticket in 3 monthly payments. And I was like, oh, this is new. Not going to use it, but nice to see the option. So that's already appeared. I think I'm not on the beta, so I think must be in 18. Is it? There
are some, I think it's Klarna specifically that works currently, and what they're adding is Affirm. Is
another one. Okay, so, I kind of steer clear of those.
And that's the thing. I worry, and we do have to get going, but the last thing I wanted to say about it is,
late.
we did start a little late. My next guest is waiting though, so I worry that having those buy now, pay later options just so easy to get to I'll tell you, I'm of mixed minds about this, because there's a part of me that worries that my concern about this is already a little bit out of touch in a way, because some people do genuinely need some sort of help when it comes to paying for things. And so I understand that, because growing up, that is very much the world I lived in. And so I like that people are, like, the things are more accessible in that way. But then I've also seen how when things are more accessible, like payday loans, for example, I've had family members get involved in that stuff, and that does not go well. It's a very slippery slope. And so when you're right there on your phone and you see a thing you want, and then it's so easy to just do that, that's much harder than, much easier than, for example, having to fill out which is still very easy. Fill out a credit card application and get a credit card and run up your debt that way. Still easy to do, but a little bit more complicated than this instant gratification of this. And it was honestly a little depressing that every time I use Instacart, which again, here's me kind of sounding like an elitist, I get my groceries delivered, seeing it every time, would you like to pay for these groceries with Klarna? And it makes me think about folks who are doing that.
Just
and then
do that. Yeah.
every time paying for your groceries that way. And hey, if you're paying it, great. I think that there's an aspect of it that feels a little predatory. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, it's the flip side of what we're talking about initially, like making it easy to subscribe and easy to cancel. These are great conveniences, but you're right. It takes away perhaps that friction that makes you think before you do it. And removing that friction.
That's what it is. Yes, the thinking. That's what I'm getting at. That is how I want to describe it, because that helps me kind of, that's what it is. I would like people to be given the opportunity to think a little bit more before they pop into that. It's funny. I think why this is like a struggle for me is there's a family member who pops up in my head as I'm talking about these kinds of things. Yeah. And so it's kind of it's a tough situation. But,
I hope it's something you could turn off, because if it's on once my son has a credit card, I don't want him to have the option to do it.
Just constantly.
These turn it off.
These $500 sneakers or trainers that were out of reach are suddenly within reach because I can split them up over, 5-6 payments. So yeah.
But Apple Pay is good. I like Apple Pay, I would say. It is.
Yeah,
it's definitely been a great, and the security thing is huge, which you mentioned. But yes, I was just one thing. This is the 10th anniversary of Apple Pay, right? Which is why this was introduced. And just before I go, I wanted to point everyone to TheVerge.com today, because it's a big anniversary year, 2024. And there's a lot, and we have done a 20-year look back. The Verge is in 2004 right now, and there are so many awesome retro stories that I think all of your listeners are going to really enjoy. This one's mine, but there's many. And so basically the kind of concept of this is that 2004 was the beginning of the future that we're living in today. So many big companies started in 2004, and there's and the design on this is out of the world. You need to go, you look at it on a desktop if you can, but there's so many Easter eggs in here. And I think everyone on the call, everyone on the TWiT listeners and viewers will really enjoy a lot of the look backs there. There's Gmail, there's Dig, there's just everything. Motorola flip phones. It's a real walk down memory lane. So go check that out, and I look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, see you again soon, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right, bye.
All righty, we're going to take a quick break before we come back with our first of 2 interviews. I just want to tell you quickly about ThreatLocker, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. A question I think I already know the answer to. Do zero-day exploits and supply chain attacks keep you up at night? Well, worry no more. You can harden your security with ThreatLocker. Worldwide, companies like JetBlue trust ThreatLocker to secure their data and keep their business operations flying high. Imagine taking a proactive, deny-by-default approach to cybersecurity, blocking every action, every process, every user, unless they're actually authorized by your team. That is what ThreatLocker helps you do. It helps you do this and provides a full audit of every action for risk management and compliance. Their 24/7 US-based support team fully supports onboarding and beyond. So that means stopping the exploitation of trusted applications within your organization and keeping your business secure and protected from ransomware. Organizations across any industry can benefit from ThreatLocker's ring fencing by isolating critical and trusted applications from unintended uses or weaponization and limiting attackers' lateral movement within the network. I remember asking about ring fencing when we were talking to ThreatLocker, and something that just absolutely blew me away is that it was able to foil a number of attacks that were not stopped by traditional EDR. The 2020 cyber attack on SolarWinds Orion was actually foiled by ring fencing. Oh, And we should mention ThreatLocker works for Macs too. So get unprecedented visibility and control of your cybersecurity quickly, easily, and cost effectively. ThreatLocker's zero trust endpoint protection platform offers a unified approach to protecting users, devices, and networks against the exploitation of zero-day vulnerabilities. Get a free 30-day trial and learn more about how ThreatLocker can help mitigate unknown threats and ensure compliance. Visit threatlocker.com. That's threatlocker.com. All right, we are back from the break, and that means it is time for our next interview. Joining me, the man about Techsploder, it's Jason Howell. Hello, Jason.
Hey, I'm over here Techsploding, upstairs, downstairs, whatever the technology calls for, I'll be there.
Well, today it calls for your help because I saw that Android 15 has released for Pixel devices, but I wanted to get some clarification before we get into things.
Sure.
I was hoping you kind of help me out because I thought that I remembered reading that Android 15 launched back in September. So maybe you could help us understand the difference between a source code release and the actual rollout.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's who is the release for primarily, right? Like Google has with its major releases, they have this long scale map and all these different stages, developer preview, blah, 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 pre-release, all this kind of stuff. Finally, they get to the release of the source code, which is essentially kind of the thumbs up for developers to say, if you haven't already, it's time to get busy. It's time to validate. For anyone who feels motivated or inclined, you can go ahead and grab that source code. And there's a lot of easy ways to do this now so that not just developers can do it, but you can put it on your device and you can live La Vida Android 15 earlier than kind of what they did this week, which is they basically said, all right, Android 15, all systems go. We're pushing it out to all supported devices immediately. The ones that we have control over, which for Google, that's Pixel devices. And then all the other manufacturers, they basically have to validate and get it rolling out to their devices as well. So think of like this phase as being kind of like the all systems go. Yes, it's been out for a while, but now we want everyone to enjoy it. If your manufacturer or your OEM will let you.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Now, we should talk about then some of the new features that Google announced as part of the rollout in Pixel Drop. And up first, I saw some conversation about theft detection lock, which I think is a pretty cool feature that I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, for sure. This is a really cool feature, actually. And this kind of goes in line with Google is really trying to make changes to Android that make it less appealing to people who are, who are out and about in the world just looking for a device to steal and then resell or turn into a burner phone, or I don't know what people do with it once they sell devices. But it's also kind of an extension of something that Google's been doing in other directions. We've seen a little bit of this in like earthquake detection, where they realize we've got all these devices seeded out there and they've got all sorts of sensors and all this data and information. How can we use those sensors and that data in other ways to help users? And so this is one of those ways that they're achieving both of those goals. Artificial intelligence, machine learning models on device that actually detect when a potential theft attempt is taking place. And that includes, pinging different signals from the device, the different sensors. They've analyzed the patterns, all that kind of stuff. And so it can automatically lock the screen if it identifies the pattern that seems to indicate that this phone has suddenly been snatched out of someone's hand. And and then shortly after that motion, there's the running motion or the biking or the driving away. All of these things kind of collectively together indicate, based on their data and these models that, that phone's probably with high level of certainty been stolen. Now we can, act on that. So you can lock down the phone immediately when you detect that pattern. It also works alongside offline device lock, which essentially means, sometimes thieves would take the phone And they'd immediately power it down so that it doesn't ping a network until they can take it to a place later where it can't get onto a network or something and do whatever their systems are that give them access. These features actually work when the device is powered off after a certain amount of time. It's like, oh, you know what? We're going to lock this phone if it's been in that state for too long based on what they say. And the cool thing about this is, yes, it's introduced with Android 15, but it's actually supported on versions much earlier than that. I think it goes all the way down to Android 10. The main thing to know, though, is that you got to enable it first. This is one of those features that you got to opt into because it's using all those extra sensors and that sort of stuff.
Gotcha. Now, there's also something called private space, which has a cool name, and I wish it was about, I don't know, space travel, but it is not. What is private space?
My own galaxy out in the distance. No, it's not that amazing. I mean, it's amazing in its own right, but, we're not going to space anytime soon because of this feature. Private space is essentially a digital safe on your phone, and within the Android device, isolated from the main user space. And so you can do a lot of things with something like this. Like you can hide apps from the main app drawer. You can tie private space to a different Google account. So if you want to have a separate Google account on your phone and you don't want there to be any sort of visual indication of that, then you can have that account be attached to the private space. You can hide that private space from view entirely, or you can have a little zone that's like, tap this to access it. I mean, it's got a lot of customizability to it. I haven't played around with it specifically yet, but and also it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if I had that, like, well, what would I use it for? I don't even know that I have any real reason to use it, but I can imagine there are a lot of reasons why someone might want to, hide their activity or hide that particular app or whatever the case may be within the private space. This gives them a way to do that. And this is one of those features that has appeared on a lot of other OEMs, which, often this is how Google works is, companies like Samsung and OnePlus and whatever, they implement these features. And I don't know if it's Google reading them going, oh, okay, that's actually a good idea. Or if Google, kind of plays the Apple card and they're like, you know what, we're going to wait until the time's right and we're going to do it our way. Whatever the case may be, we've seen it before, but now Google's kind of bringing it into Android proper. So OEMs don't have to spin up their own version of this.
Got it. We're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask Jason some questions about foldables, because yes, Android runs on many a foldable. In fact, if you've got a foldable, it's probably running Android.
It's probably Android, yeah.
We'll take a look at that in just a moment. But I want to tell you about 1Password, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. An easy question for you. Do your end users always work on those company-owned devices and the apps that are approved by your IT team? Nah, I didn't think so. So how in the world do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? Well, 1Password actually has an answer to that question. So we're not just asking you the question, we've got an answer too. It's extended access management. 1Password extended access management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems that traditional IAM and MDM simply can't touch. So I like this metaphor of the kind of nice brick path that runs along the quad of a college campus. It's built to be used to be walked on. And those are kind of equivalent to the IT-approved apps, the company-owned devices, the managed employee identities. But then if you look at a quad, you'll see these little paths that are worn through the grass, the paths that people actually use because they're shortcuts between point A and point B. That is likened to the unmanaged devices, the shadow IT apps, the non-employee identities like contractors. Most security tools that you use are only going to work on those brick paths, but a lot of the problems actually exist on those well-worn shortcuts. 1Password Extended Access Management is the first security solution that brings all of these unmanaged devices, apps, and identities under your control. So it spreads out to those paths. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected, every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. It's security for the way we work today, and it's now generally available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra, and it's in beta for Google Workspace customers. So check it out at onepassword.com/twit. That's 1PASSWORD.com/twit. And we thank 1Password for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and we are joined by Jason Howell of TechSploder, who's giving us a rundown on what's going on in the Android world. I wanted to ask, there have been a few improvements for foldables and tablets in this release of Android 15. Tell us a little bit about these updates, and then maybe you could give me your sort of rating, because I've heard people complain about Android's lackluster support of the foldables that are there, or maybe it just doesn't quite work how they expected. Do you think these updates are going to help combat that narrative?
Yeah. So first of all, a couple of the updates that they're rolling out here, and obviously Google has skin in the game, right? They've got the Pixel Pro Fold 2 and the Pixel Fold before it. It's always hard with the names. So I think Google is a little more motivated now than they were before. Either that is, it's hard to know whether the snake's eating its tail or the tail is eating the snake, because did Google, put out its foldable, for that reason, or did they do the features and they happen to serve the foldable? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Persistent taskbar is one of the features. So essentially this is a taskbar that you can pin down to the bottom of the screen instead of it going away or hiding, which essentially kind of mirrors or mimics what you might get if you were on a laptop, essentially. And when you've got that larger screen, you fold out to that larger screen, being able to have that taskbar down there that you can pin there just improves the multitasking kind of capabilities, which is something that foldables are really good at. App pairs, which is essentially pairing two apps side by side. I think maybe you can even pair 3 possibly, although that wouldn't be a pair, that would be more. But I know on other OEMs you can do more than that. So I'd be surprised if Google doesn't have that now, if they don't have that eventually, because when you're talking about that large screen real estate, sure, you can half it, but then you can also kind of half the half, and depending on the app that you're throwing in there, it becomes really usable. Again, going back to multitasking and being able to say, I use these 2 apps together all the time. Why do I have to set them up every time? I just want to hit that button and have it open. Cover screen optimization is another criticism that people have levied against smartphones in the foldable realm, and with Android, is essentially that interplay between what happens on the cover screen and what happens on the inside. If you're doing something on the cover screen and then you open up to the inside, does it scale that experience to the inner larger screen, continuity between those screens? Does it do that gracefully? And also, is there better support or adequate support for developers who want to scale their apps to fit the smaller cover screen? Because they're not always the form or the shape of a normal smartphone. Sometimes if you're going to a flipped size, then the cover screen's like a little square. It's like a tiny little rectangle. And your apps, how do you make sure that the developers can develop for that screen? Edge-to-edge app support is another one, which kind of makes for a more immersive experience. And I think as far as your question, as far as lackluster support for foldables, I think Google is learning and addressing these finally. I think that has been a criticism. Foldables are not new anymore. They kind of seem, it's easy to think of them as this new thing, but they've been around for 5-6 years now, and of course Samsung's been really leading the charge on that, I think, as far as the big manufacturers are concerned. But Samsung has the resources to build around their needs as needed, and they were really ahead of the game when it comes to what Google builds into Android. And so kind of touching back on what I was talking about earlier, Google kind of recognizing the scene and recognizing where they need to focus in order to kind of catch up, or in order to kind of support these things on a platform level so that other OEMs don't have to do it. And personally, I think Google's doing a much better job of that. I think they're kind of catching up and getting to the point to where it's like, all right, it feels like you care a lot more. Like I said, they got skin in the game, so they better care.
Absolutely. And then I'll ask, are there any other features that you're excited about? For me, I was pretty pumped to see that the weather app is adding a pollen tracker.
Always the weather app. Always the weather app. Not just you, Micah. Everybody loves a good weather app update.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it's a thing on Android Faithful. We talk about that all the time. People get nuts about weather app updates. And it does look good. I got to say, the new weather app on Android looks great. Predictive back animations is kind of a boring-ish thing to refer to, but essentially what it means is if I'm in an app and I'm looking at it and I go to swipe out of that app to go to the home screen or go to a different app in the multitasking way, it essentially, before I complete that action, it kind of gives me a hint of where I'm going in the background. So it lets the app that I'm switching to peek through, and it just gives you a little bit of confidence that the OS is doing what you expect it to do versus like doing the action and then, oh, I'm in this app. Why did I go there? That's a little quality of life thing. I think the thing I'm most excited about, though, like I really legitimately can't wait for this, is the home controls screensaver, which essentially is a screensaver. So, yawn, it's kind of boring, but it essentially takes the home controls that we've seen on like Nest Hub devices. Maybe you have the Nest Hub in your kitchen and you pull up the home controls and you turn on the lights in the living room based on the control deck that you have there. This is a screensaver that integrates all that. So when your phone or your tablet goes into screensaver mode, it's like an active screensaver mode. And this does include, my understanding, the pass-through of cameras, like smart cameras that you have. So part of your screensaver is like, whatever the last thing is your doorbell camera showed, or a live view of your doorbell. And I want to play around with that to know to what degree that is, because that's kind of nutso. That would be really cool if it was like a passing through the video to my screensaver. It also sounds really resource intensive. So I'd be surprised if it works exactly like that, but I'm really curious to play with it.
And then last, I'll just ask you, this is, I know, a tough question. When should people expect to see Android 15 hit their device? And maybe is there a good place to check for update availability?
I mean, duck and cover on this one, because it's never... It's never easy and it's never obvious. I mean, the only way that I know that I do regularly, maybe there is a general receptacle to, a place that collects this information. And undoubtedly there is. But, I just go online and I'm like, I got this phone. When am I getting Android 15? Because some of the manufacturers have made those statements as far as when to expect it. OnePlus is announcing the rollout for next week. Obviously, if you have a Pixel phone, you're getting it right now. I have it. If you have a Samsung phone, like this is actually kind of interesting. In this day and age, year 2024, Samsung S24 isn't going to get it until next year, early next year, which is a total bummer. I would think that they'd be moving that up a little bit closer. I mean, the fact is that Android is filled with device manufacturers and companies of all different stripes, and they've got their teams working on things like this to get it up and running, and they're not all synced up, and they're not going to be. So you could get it next week if you're on OnePlus. You could get it next year if you're on Samsung. It sounds kind of backwards, actually, when I say it like that. But it's a bummer, yeah.
All right, Jason, I want to thank you for taking some time to join us today. Yeah. Where are the places that people should be going to follow along with what you're doing? Oh,
the places. Well, this is about Android, so I'll say Android Faithful, androidfaithful.com, where we're doing the podcast. Me, Ron Richards, WinTwit Dow, and Michal Rahman. We're also providing a lot of written content for the website, so go to androidfaithful.com for that. And then if you want to follow me, I'm doing most of my stuff on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@techsploder. All one word.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you, Micah. So good to see you.
Good to see you too. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We have one little break left before we come in with our next interview. This time, somebody's gone hands-on with new devices from Amazon. Before we get there, though, one more sponsor. I want to tell you about CashFly, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Literally. For more than 20 years, CashFly has held a track record for high-performing, ultra-reliable content delivery, serving more than 5,000 companies in more than 80 countries. And at TWiT, we've been using CashFly for more than a decade and love the lag-free video loading, the hyper-fast downloads, and the friction-free site interactions. CashFly is the only CDN that's built for throughput. It has ultra-low latency video streaming that delivers video to more than 1 million concurrent users, lightning-fast gaming that delivers downloads faster with zero lag or glitches or outages, mobile content optimization that offers automatic and simple image optimization so your site loads faster on any device, plus flexible month-to-month billing for as long as needed and discounts for fixed terms. You can design your contract when you switch to CashFly. CashFly delivers rich media content up to 158% faster than other major CDNs and allows you to shield your site content in the cloud, ensuring a 100% cache hit ratio. And with CashFly's elite managed packages, you'll get the VIP treatment because your dedicated account manager will be with you from day one, ensuring a smooth implementation and reliable 24/7 support when you need it. So learn how you can get your first month free at cashfly.com/twit. That's CACHEFLY.com/twit. And we thank CashFly for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and I'm very excited for our next guest from CNET. It's David Carnoy, who's joining us to talk about his hands-on experience with Amazon's new Kindles. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you did get the opportunity to check out, at least for a brief period, the 4 new Kindle models. Before we even get into the details, I kind of was curious, which one stood out to you the most? And why did it stand out?
Well, I think everyone's talking about the color one. It's called the Color Soft, which is a little bit weird name for a product, but maybe it's because the colors are a little bit muted compared to like an LCD screen. But so that's really a brand new Kindle in terms of they've never done a color one before. So Kobo has some color e-readers, but this is the first color Kindle. So that's the one that kind of is getting the most attention. The other ones are upgrade to the Paperwhite, which may be the most popular model. And then the entry-level model got also a little bit of an upgrade. And then the Scribe, which is the tablet one, which comes with the stylus, that also got a little bit of an upgrade. And had some AI features, which apparently are also coming to the original Scribe too.
Interesting. Now, the article does mention that the new entry-level Kindle and the Paperwhite models have seen a slight price increase. How significant is that change, do you think, for consumers? And is the price increase justified by the changes as far as you see it in these devices?
Well, I mean, I just think like every time now Amazon seems to do a device upgrade, it usually costs $10 more for whether it's Fire tablets, whatever. They chalk it up to inflation, and I think they're pretty good about what they can produce these things for. They're not necessarily price gouging people on them because after all, they're trying to make money on the content, so they want to put them at the most affordable prices. And yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people obviously know that there's the list price on these devices, but then Amazon puts them on sale during Prime Day, or, we'll certainly see around Black Friday. It's unclear. The Scribe took longer to go on sale, but, generally the entry level one will be like $40 cheaper, something like that, so it's, the entry level one used to cost, you could even get it for, I think, $50-$60. And so, hopefully we'll see those kind of sales going forward. So it's hard to say what the actual price for these will be, but it is still, it's still a little bit expensive for a dedicated e-reader device, especially the color Kindle. The Color Soft is $280, and it only comes. What's kind of weird is the Paperwhite comes in a standard version with 16 gigabytes of storage starts at $160. But then there's a signature edition that has 32 gigabytes of storage and has wireless charging, and also has a little sensor on the that essentially auto adjusts the lighting for you depending on your environment. And then, so the color one only comes in that signature edition. So it's 32 gigabytes of storage and the wireless charging. So it's kind of already built in that it's going to be the higher end version of that. I don't know if they'll do a entry level model of that someday, and I assume eventually the prices for the color ones will come down. But for now, who knows how hard these things are for them to produce, and I think they're just they're putting it at $280. If someone really wants one of the color ones, they'll go buy it, and it's really for the these hardcore people who say, like, I've always been waiting for a color Kindle.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about the Color Soft. Obviously, in comparison to a tablet that has an OLED display or an LCD display, it's going to be different. But what kind of content do you think kind of benefits the most from this feature? Like, why would someone choose to go the Kindle and Colorsoft route over a more traditional tablet that still sort of costs more money, but the prices are getting pretty close there?
Yeah, I mean, for cover art and stuff like that, it brings it to life more obviously, and then it's really just kind of graphic novels and comic books. It's a little small, it's a little small for all this stuff. It's only a 7-inch diagonal screen, so it's not like the large scribe, which would probably be the best thing to look at a comic book on, or a graphic novel. But and then they have, they were showing books like, Lonely Planet books that have maps and some photos in them, travel books that it does appear to down res when you do the color from 300 ppi to 150 ppi. So it isn't quite as sharp when you are in the color. And then it default, it knows when you're doing monochrome content versus color content. So anyway, so I think, it's unclear, but people have been asking for it and I've always wondered, like, why can't this be in color? Why has it been monochrome for so many years? I mean, I think the original Kindle came out something like 17 years ago. So
wow. 17 years of waiting, and it's finally here. I think it was very clever of them to call it the Colorsoft, just to, as you said, kind of get you prepared for what the resolution is able to do at this point. Now, outside of the color version, the Kindle Paperwhite, you mentioned some of the things there. What are the upgrades to this over the last version? If somebody had the last edition of Paperwhite, is this one that would be worth the upgrade?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon was making a big deal about that at the presentation, kind of going like, this is the favorite device of Kindle users, and it's really hard to get them to upgrade it. But we think we've done it with this one. I don't know. I mean, it definitely feels zippier. They say the page turns are 25% faster, but the performance, it's like 20% faster overall. So it feels more responsive. I actually have it. I have it here. I have.
Oh, nice.
See that? I got the Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Oh, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, yeah.
So some graphics, but it's definitely, and it's also the screen. The previous version had a 6.8-inch screen, so they reduced the bezels a little bit, and it's now 7 inches. So it's a little bit bigger, a bit bigger screen in a same size chassis. It weighs, I think 6 grams more, this version. It's a little bit thinner. Battery life is 3 months, with moderate usage, I guess. So again, these with these e-readers, I mean, it is actually a substantial change for one of these e-readers, which tend to feel very incremental, because e-ink, which these all have, is an inherently sluggish technology compared to LCD, or these OLED screens. So it's already a little bit slow. So they're trying to eke out just a little bit more speed with all these things to make them feel more responsive. So I mean, I think that's, maybe you pass on that old Paperwhite to your friend or sell it to someone else, and then take the money and put it towards this new one. And I think, people people have become kind of hardcore about their Kindles. I mean, some people, people get really upset, like they don't have, page turn buttons on them. They don't have, I wanted a new Oasis. They're
very particular. Yeah.
I wanted a new Oasis. And, so I'm just looking at, like, our YouTube video has all these comments on it. So, you can see, people, a lot of them really don't. It's one of these technologies where you're reading a book on it. If you're just reading books on it, it's not that big a deal to get a little bit faster page turns. And, it is nice to feel more responsive, just because, again, you want it to be more like your phone or a tablet, and it's not quite there. At least in terms of responsiveness. People buy these because they don't want to be distracted by other things while they're reading. And, it's big. It's, Amazon also talk a lot about how like millennials and Gen Zers are picking up these things, which is, a little bit surprising that they claim that they had the best sales ever for the Kindle in the last year or so.
That is surprising.
That was also, a little bit, but, our YouTube video did a lot better than I thought it would. So maybe it's true.
There's some truth to it, maybe. Now, let's talk real quick about the Kindle Scribe, because originally it seemed like the second generation Kindle Scribe was going to get some features that could maybe convince first gen Kindle Scribe users to upgrade. But then I heard you say earlier that those AI enhancements might be coming to the first gen of Kindle Scribe. So
yeah. I initially asked the PR people that were there. I was like, "Hey, are the original Scribe's going to get these features too?" Because it didn't seem necessarily dependent on like processor speed or anything, And they were like, "No, we don't think so." But let's check on that. And they came back and like, "Yeah, actually, they are going to get it. I don't know when, but I think the changes were more." Around the idea that they appear to have changed kind of the layer on top of the screen to make it seem more paper-like when you use there's a new stylus. It doesn't have any batteries, but it's got apparently a new tip on it. The weight is better. It feels more like weighted better, and so when you're writing on the screen, it feels more like you're writing on a piece of paper, and then there's an eraser on the back of it that feels like a pencil eraser, more like
that's nice.
And so people they were talking about it, how people will erase something on the screen and then like feel like they have to brush away the eraser marks, but you don't. So like, that's how real it is. So that they're going for that. I mean, these are, that the scroll is also gone up in price. It was, I think, $380 for the original. Now it's up to $400. So, again, these are a little bit more of a niche device. Someone who, not only wants a big Kindle for reading, and maybe marking up PDFs and stuff like that, but it's also, the biggest feature on these things is the note taking, and
right
with there's some debate over heavy note takers. They have a new feature that's gonna you have pages of notes, and the AI features will condense your notes into kind of a bulleted list that you could then present to people, and then there's you can take your handwriting and clean it up and make it look legible.
Oh, okay.
Just you hit a button, and then, then the biggest complaint people had about kind of the Scribe was, you couldn't write on a Kindle book you bought and mark it up like you would like regular. People were like,
that's my complaint. I have the
the remarkable stuff, and people want that kind of like PDF, but it's hard to take that book that is with the DRM and all that,
right.
And so basically what Amazon has done is kind of made that you can start writing a note on the page of the book, and then a box will pop up, and then you can write in that box, and it attaches to that little section of the text, and then you can also create a thing where you can write in the margin. So you're not marking up the text exactly, but it's basically storing your comments within the text, and then you can pop them up and see what all those comments are. So it's made some improvements there that may or may not satisfy people, but I think it's definitely some advancement in that department.
Definitely. Yeah, that's good to know. Honestly, I was excited whenever you said the thing about the AI coming, because I do have that first gen Kindle Scribe, and I thought, oh man, I'm going to miss out on some of these new features, in particular this, hopefully the overlay
is accurate, and you will eventually get that software update. I mean, a lot of these things, it's, Amazon will say, like, I always say, like, are these speed gains or these performance gains, are they Is it a hardware update that is getting there or a software update? And they usually say a combination. So they have this new, like on both the Paperwhite and the color version, the ColorSoft, they have this new oxide backplane and some new technology that's, supposed to, not only help with the contrast, which is definitely seems a little bit better on the new Paperwhite. It just kind of the blacks pop a little bit more, so the text is a little bit easier to read. Mm-hmm. So they're just, again, incremental upgrades. It feels like it's the Paperwhite came out in 2021. This is not super fast moving technology, never has been. Some people have much older Kindles that they're quite satisfied with, but it is nice that Amazon has turned over the entire line.
Yeah, that was a cool thing to see, the kind of full sweep. David, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to join us today after going hands-on with these devices. Of course, folks can head over to CNET.com to check out the work that you're doing. Is there any place they can go to follow along with you online to keep up? I'm
David Carnoy at Twitter, X, but that's my main. And you can find me on Instagram. It's also at dcarnoy, and it's CARNOY for those.
All of the listeners. Thank you.
I know the spelling. So.
Thank you, David, so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All righty, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. All that's left is to remind you that the show publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is where you go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats. Also, remind you about Club Twit at twit.tv/ClubTwit. When you join the club for just $7 a month, you gain access to several awesome benefits. First and foremost, every single Twit show with no ads, just the content. Access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra stuff you won't find anywhere else, behind the scenes, before the show, after the show. Special Club Twit events get published there. So that means that when you join, you're going to have a huge back catalog of extra stuff that you wouldn't have otherwise, plus access to the members-only Discord server. A fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and also those of us here at Twit. You can tune in and watch Mikah's Crafting Corner and participate that way. And also access to the video versions of our Club Twit exclusive shows like iOS Today, Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, Home Theater Geeks, all of those shows. If you want the video versions of them, you'll need to join the club. Again, twit.tv/ClubTwit, and we would love, love, love to have you. By the way, I got to tell you about Club Twit's new referral program. If you get your friends to join, you can get a month and more free of Club Twit. Just head to twit.tv/ClubTwit/referral. If you want to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. And be sure to check out iOS Today, Hands on Mac, and on Sundays you can tune in to watch Hands on Tech, where I do product reviews and also take your questions and answer them live on air. Thank you for tuning in. And I'll catch you again next week for another episode of Tech News Weekly. Bye-bye.